Amazing twist. Black woman CEO's journey exposed as flight grounded after surprising seat theft. Lena Harris gripped the sides of her suitcase as she navigated through the crowded airport terminal, ready to embark on a flight that could transform her life. As the CEO of a burgeoning tech startup in Atlanta, she had fought tooth and nail to secure the meeting in Silicon Valley, that pivotal moment that could attract the investors she so desperately needed. The air buzzed with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety, and Lena could feel her pulse quicken as the voices of other travelers drifted into a deafening hum. In this moment, the sacrifices her family had made flooded her thoughts, and the weight of her responsibility was palpable. Her grandmother's voice echoed, reminding her that strength comes not from the absence of fear but rather in spite of it. Once at the gate, Lena settled into her plush first-class seat, a reward for her hard work that felt like a long time coming. Yet, just as she began to breathe easier, a sharply dressed man sauntered toward her and firmly declared, "You're in my seat." Stunned, Lena glanced at her boarding pass, her fingers clammy with sweat. His entitled tone churned anger and embarrassment within her. The unsettling thought clawed at her. Was she capable of standing her ground against such a brazen act? As the confrontation escalated, whispers traveled along the rows of passengers, the tension manifesting as varying shouts and muffled gasps. "Ma'am, I assure you you've made a mistake," he repeated, voice louder, drowned in the chaos around them. Lena felt the heat flush her cheeks as her stomach knotted. The eyes of onlookers bore down on her, a mixture of sympathy and judgment. Inside, her racing mind condemned her. Asserting herself risked being seen as the angry black woman, a stereotype that loomed over her career like an ever-watchful shadow. Hadn't she battled enough prejudice in boardrooms filled with men who questioned her authority? Yet here she was, grappling with the decision to push back against this appropriation of her space. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The collective tension among the passengers simmered, a discomforting blend of support for Lena and disdain for the man's entitlement. This moment was no longer just about a seat. It had become a flashpoint, a brief glimpse into the struggles faced by women of color in corporate America. Lena felt the narratives of her life, the sleepless nights balancing motherhood and ambition, the sacrifices made to carve a space for herself, swell within her. She had poured her energy into building a company from the ground up, and now she faced a simple yet profound moral dilemma. Would she let the moment pass into resentment or confront it and assert her worth? As Lena's breath hitched in her throat, her heart raced with the unknown. Would this be a defining moment of her life, a testament to her inner strength, or merely another tale of defeat in a long line of struggles? With the entire flight hanging in balance, Lena stood at the precipice of a choice that might just rewrite her narrative. A searing mix of determination and dread washed over her as she braced for what lay ahead, feeling the echoes of her hidden dreams whisper urgently, each one asking the same question. How long would she allow her voice to remain silenced? Lena inhaled deeply, steeling herself against the tide of uncertainty that threatened to engulf her. The moment stretched into an eternity, the stare of the suit-clad man immobilizing her thoughts with its weight. She could feel the sympathy from passengers like a warm cloak draped over her shoulders. But sympathy alone wouldn't change her circumstances. The path that lay ahead demanded more than passive acceptance. What good would her hard-fought achievements mean if she wouldn't fight for her rightful place in this moment? "Look, I understand how this may seem," she said, her voice steady yet quiet enough to be drowned out by the ripple of conversation. "But I have the boarding pass for this seat, and I believe you are mistaken." Her words were a careful balance of firmness and diplomacy. She could almost hear her grandmother's pride echoing alongside her resolve. The man scoffed, casting a dismissive glance at Lena and the passengers around them. "You really think you can just claim a seat like that? Just because you have a stupid little ticket?" His entitlement churned her stomach further. She noticed glances exchanged between passengers, some nodding in her subtle support while others shifted uncomfortably. Lena could feel the eyes narrowing on her, some waiting for her response, others waiting for her retreat. Sharp anxiety crept upon her, yet a newfound determination began to rise. This was not just a seat she occupied, it was a symbol of all the seats she fought for, all the doors left ajar for her. With every heartbeat, she recalled those pivotal moments, turning down opportunities that belittled her contribution, choosing courage over complacency, and always understanding that the battle isn't just for oneself, it's for paving the way for the one who follows. As if sensing her internal shift, the man leaned closer, with a smirk that could only symbolize mockery. "You're not going to embarrass yourself further, are you?" Embarrassment? Lena felt the fire within her kindle. She'd already faced worse in the boardrooms, those moments when her ideas had been dismissed and her authority challenged. If recognizing her worth was a journey, then this was a milestone she could not shy away from. Not anymore. With each exhale, she honed her focus, recalling the late nights she had poured into her startup, sacrifices and labor framing her story in the harsh light of an industry that too often dismissed her brilliance. Actually, she began with newfound clarity, her voice rising boldly, "What's embarrassing is thinking you can undermine someone else's claim simply because I don't fit your mold." The words struck the air with remarkable authority, cutting through the noise and resonating with the passengers around her. She could feel a shift. An unseen encouragement stirred among them, electrifying her resolve. The man's smirk faltered momentarily, revealing a glimpse of uncertainty. Lena's heart raced. This was it. Realization washed over her. The importance of this confrontation stretched beyond merely reclaiming a seat. It was about owning her story, about the steadfast refusal to let anyone chip away at her identity. Yet, as Lena witnessed the growing murmur among her fellow passengers, a worrisome thought pricked her mind. What if asserting herself escalated the confrontation? Would this lead to repercussions she wasn't prepared to endure? With the uncertainty looming like a cloud, Lena braced herself as a flight attendant moved toward them, unaware of the tempest raging in the first-class cabin. In that brief moment, Lena realized she had more to fight for than just her seat. She was fighting for every marginalized voice silenced in moments like this throughout the corporate world. The call to stand tall resonated deeply, firm, yet vulnerable, while the stakes rose higher. As the flight attendant arrived and asked for clarity, Lena stood on the precipice of a pivotal moment that could transform her, not just in this flight, but in the broader narrative of her life. The weight of her choice pressed upon her. How would she respond now that the need to act had become more pressing than ever? The battle between silence and assertion lay in her hands, a duel that might redefine who she was for years to come. The cabin fell silent, and the eyes of the world awaited her decision. Would she retreat or claim her voice in its fullest strength? As Lena locked eyes with the attendant, a new current of determination surged within her. The moment of truth was here, and it was time to confront her reality. The flight attendant, sensing the tension thickening around them, paused as she took in the two figures before her. With an impartial gaze, she addressed the man first. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" The request hung in the air, a lifeline tossed into the choppy waters of Lena's brewing confrontation. The man's expression shifted from arrogance to unease as he reluctantly fished out his ticket. Lena's heart pounded, a rhythm that resonated with her newfound resolve. She could feel the weight of the moment bearing down upon both of them, a shared tension amplifying the stakes as the attendant scrutinized the tickets. In this abrasive yet essential encounter, Lena was uncovering not only a fight for herself, but also the courage that responds to injustice. "Thank you," the attendant said, tilting her head slightly as she compared details. Lena watched as the attendant's brow furrowed and anticipation flooded the cabin. She could hear murmurs spiraling, a silent conversation buzzing through her fellow passengers. The atmosphere hung between disbelief and excitement, shifting like shadows dancing on the edge of a decision. "Ma'am," the attendant turned to Lena, her voice steady but gentle. "Could you please show me your boarding pass?" Lena's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her ticket. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind, yet it was different now, cloaked in the immediacy of impending truth. Here, she replied, a sense of power coursing through her as she handed it over. The attendant nodded, verifying the information, her eyes flickering between the two documents. As the attendant deliberated, Lena's mind raced through her tumultuous journey as a founder in a hyper-competitive industry. Each dismissal and challenge flashed before her, dismissive board members, late-night presentations met with raised eyebrows, and the relentless self-doubt that often clung to her like a second skin. In this flight cabin, against the backdrop of raw vulnerability, she discovered a spirit that yearned not just for validation, but dignity. Then it happened. The attendant looked up, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "I see a discrepancy. The seat you're occupying, it's assigned to you, ma'am." A wave of quiet disbelief rippled through the cabin. Lena felt the heat of reality settle on her shoulders, a mantle of validation that felt both liberating and exhilarating. "And, sir," the attendant continued, her tone unwavering, "you are in the wrong seat." The man's expression contorted with disbelief, fury rising to the surface. "What? This is absurd!" His voice cracked, desperately searching for a justification to salvage his pride. But the fervor in its pitch only rendered him smaller in that moment, stripped of the bravado he had clung to so tightly. Lena sensed a shift within her, a deep-rooted satisfaction intertwined with the cautious acknowledgement of what just transpired. This was more than a battle for a seat. It was a decisive reclaiming of the narrative she had fought to write. The power of her voice had cut through layers of entitlement that too often drowned out those like her. She couldn't retreat now, not when clarity ensued. With resolve, she met the eyes of the man once more. "It's not just a ticket," she said slowly, letting the weight of her words seep into the atmosphere. "It's about respect. For each other. For our journeys." The crowd murmured in agreement. Lena could feel them rally behind her freshly solidified stance. Each word dripped with meaning, transforming the moment into one of personal affirmation and growth. But the triumphant energy was fleeting. The weight of repercussions still loomed. As the flight attendant moved away to address the disagreement, Lena's heart quickened, wondering what remnants of the conflict might still linger. What would her action cost her in the long run? Courageous breakthroughs never came without consequence, and she was acutely aware of the precarious balance between victory and vulnerability. A realization struck her. The very tension that had gripped her moments earlier was now a stepping stone toward something greater. She had stood against a tide of injustice. Where might this newfound strength lead her next? As the man's voice escalated into disbelief, Lena felt the spark of ambition spark within her. This is just the beginning, she thought, preparing to transcend this confrontation. It was time to redefine her journey, to harness this moment to fuel not just her career, but her spirit. In the midst of the chaos, a fleeting thought whispered like an uncharted map in her mind. What if this confrontation propelled greater opportunities? What if reclaiming her voice here paved the way for an even larger fight beyond the flight? The attendant returned, attention refocused. "We'll have to move you, sir." And with that, the stakes of Lena's journey shifted, setting the stage for decisions that could yet alter her narrative profoundly. Before she could catch her breath, she realized this was merely the opening act of her story, with a larger conflict beckoning her beyond the cabin's confines. What awaited her in the world beyond those airplane doors? The airplane cabin buzzed with a mix of disbelief and intrigue as the reality of the moment settled in. Lena sat back in her seat, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. The opening act of her newfound rebellion had unveiled something deeper within her, a burgeoning self that was no longer willing to shrink into the shadows or remain silent in the face of indignity. Yet now came the hard part, sustaining this momentum amidst the cacophony of opinions swirling around her. The flight attendant resumed her duties, but Tina's mind was abuzz, contemplating the implications of her actions. While others around her animatedly debated the encounter, she felt herself retreat inward, analyzing the layers of her confrontation. Was it merely emotional, or did it hint at a deeper calling? The collision of head and heart sparked an internal dialogue that had been dormant for too long. Lena had always positioned herself as a leader, Yet the recent exchanges reminded her of the fragility of authority, especially as a woman of color in a predominantly male-dominated industry. Ironically, the arduous journey she had embarked upon a few years back, fueled by ambition and vision, now felt both empowering and isolating. The moments of self-doubt she had struggled with were now eclipsed by a burgeoning sense of purpose that was steadily rooting itself within her. She traced how the confrontation had ripped through a veil of complacency, revealing a reservoir of strength she hadn't known existed. "Am I just an anomaly?" she thought, grappling with her place within the high-stakes world she inhabited. "Or can I truly make a difference?" The fight over a mere airplane seat veered into the territory of collective significance. Decisions had consequences, and how she navigated this journey from here on out was crucial. As the aircraft ascended, so did the trajectory of her thoughts. Each challenge she faced in the boardroom or at networking events felt recalibrated in the wake of her public confrontation. She contemplated the snubs and rebuffs that had often clouded her ambitions, the dismissive glances, the hushed voices that reduced her innovative ideas to mere whims. Suddenly, all of it felt like a driving force, a call to action to challenge the status quo and to cultivate her influence. Perhaps this was a sign that shedding the layers that shadowed her presence was paramount. Engulfed by the atmosphere of determination around her, Lena maneuvered within her mind. What if she transformed the experience into a catalyst? A workshop targeting young women of color in business could harness her voice, a platform not just to share her stories, but to empower others to reclaim their narratives and recognize their worth. Igniting such initiatives could redefine how women leaders were represented in corporate settings and could forge pathways previously unseen. As the plane soared higher, a persistent flutter of excitement coursed through her. This sensation, this idea, potentially the key to redefining her arc and the arcs of many others. The moment of clarity inspired her to embrace the role she had unwittingly stepped into, a beacon of change. Then came the question that made her heart race and her mind whirl. Training the next generation, how would she measure success? Would it signify a departure from her keeping safe, conservative aspirations in exchange for bold, disruptive strategies? As the flight captain's voice echoed through the cabin, announcing preparations for their descent, Lena was met with the weight of reality. There was a world waiting beyond those airplane doors, full of injustices that begged her to embrace the unfiltered courage she'd barely begun to harness. The man from earlier was still muttering indignantly in the back, but she felt a renewed empowerment surge from within. If she could stand against the tide in a confined place, could she do it on a grander scale? Her mind spun with this pivotal thought. The time has come to affect not just her narrative, but to influence the next chapter for many women like her. A comforting thrill promised to unfurl a new journey, one that could change everything. And as the wheels creaked upon landing, Lena's heart raced with possibilities. What awaited her back on solid ground? The realization settled in. The greatest struggle was just beginning. As the plane touched down, Lena felt a surge of mixed emotions. The chatter around her faded into a background hum, replaced by a rhythmic drumbeat in her chest that echoed her racing thoughts. She had landed, but not just physically. She felt a crackle of change suspended just out of reach, begging to be seized. Disembarking, she experienced a moment of disorientation before the familiar sights of the terminal flooded her senses. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and the rush of travelers created a chaotic ambiance. Yet within, she sifted through her thoughts, organizing her newfound purpose. Seeing herself no longer as an anomaly, but as an agent of transformation stirred an unfamiliar courage. Her first meeting was set for the following day, a strategic session with her team, but Lena couldn't afford to procrastinate. Inspiration licked at the edges of her consciousness, demanding expression. She sat in a quiet corner of the airport cafe, determined to flesh out her workshop concept. With each keystroke, she imagined a room filled with eager faces, hungry for connection and empowerment. A vision began to materialize. What if she constructed agendas that included not just her story, but also invites local leaders and mentors to share their insights? What if she integrated interactive activities that challenged traditional narratives? Each thought ignited momentum until the pages filled with ideas, on how to foster confidence through hands-on experiences. She envisioned panels, mentorship circles, and brainstorming sessions that would uplift not just herself, but each participant who stepped into her sphere. Yet another wave of apprehension washed over her. Could she support them effectively? Who was she to speak on these topics when self-doubt still lurked in her shadows? The voices of her past failures surfaced uninvited. The dismissals, the intimidation, the moments when she hesitated before presenting her ideas, all reminders of her struggles haunted her. But in that cafe, she resolved to expunge those haunting memories. She was no longer the woman who tiptoed around the edges. She was becoming a force to be reckoned with. She questioned her past every time it threatened to sway her vision. Were those moments truly failures, or stepping stones disguised as obstacles? Each reflection narrowed her focus. Those experiences equipped her with a unique perspective that wasn't an impediment, but an asset. Revisiting the airplane incident shifted her understanding as well. It wasn't merely a fight. It was a declaration of autonomy. Lena began to frame her narrative in a new light. Her experiences were woven threads in the fabric of her journey, capable of guiding others toward resilience. The doubt morphing into clarity buoyed her confidence like never before. As she walked to her car, vision crystallizing, every small gesture felt monumental. With the workshop idea firmly rooted, she sensed anticipation sparking her environment anew. The balance of challenge and promise layered her thoughts, compelling her to interrogate her corporate role with a fierceness she hadn't fully embraced before. Would she continue to climb the corporate ladder, conforming to expectations, or would she blaze a trail unyielding, galvanizing others along the way? The night grew longer, suffocating her with its stillness, yet Lena reveled in the quiet. She needed contacts, resources, and allies. Reaching out to influencers in her network, she recognized the importance of mobilizing support, a direct line to creating the change she was beginning to manifest. Her phone rang abruptly, dispelling the tranquil draft of her contemplations. It was her mentor, Nelson, checking in after hearing whispers about her unexpected confrontation. The conversation prompted deeper exploration of her aspirations. As a leader, what was she truly willing to risk? With that question hanging in the air, stirring something restless inside her, Lena's determination solidified. With her heart racing, she leaned toward the window, watching city lights blink alive like possibilities. The moment had come to embrace uncertainty, to harness the power of her voice, ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. Would she hold steadfast to her beliefs, or allow the whispers of the doubters to sway her? As she pondered these daunting futures, a piercing realization struck. Her next move would not simply redefine her trajectory, but might challenge the entire fabric of how leadership was perceived. The fear coaxed a familiar hesitance within her, but the emerging resolve gripped her tightly. With her purpose boiling just beneath the surface, Lena felt the pull toward the precipice of her destiny. But first, she knew she had to face the harshest truth. Was she truly ready to confront the world, and more alarmingly, herself? With this introspection crackling like static in the back of her mind, Lena felt the inevitable approach of a confrontation that would ultimately shape her path. The morning sun streamed through the high-rise office windows, casting sharp shadows on Lena's desk as she entered the conference room. The familiar scent of fresh coffee filled the air, invigorating her senses and fueling the new purpose that swirled within her. Participants were settling in, exchanging glances and shifting through their papers, some still unsuspecting of her ramping ambition that day. She took a moment visualizing the impact her workshop could create, then squared her shoulders. As she glanced around, she caught sight of Carla, a senior executive whose critical remarks had once stung deeply. The lingering taste of her past made Lena's pulse quicken. Could she command the room, inspire respect, and keep her doubts at bay? The question coiled tightly in her mind. "Good morning, everyone," Lena began, her voice steady but low, carrying an undertone of resolve she hadn't fully expected. "Today we'll discuss not just our projects, but our personal narratives and the power they yield." The room shifted. A mix of interest and skepticism hung heavily in the air. Lena pressed on, determined to outshine her lingering apprehension. She turned to the agenda, leading them through a description of her vision for the workshop. As she elaborated on mentorship circles and interactive elements designed to empower, she noticed a few heads nodding in agreement. This subtle response filled her with zest, igniting a spark of conviction that crackled against the backdrop of her seasoned doubts. Yet, each positive glance from her colleagues felt laced with invisible barriers. Carla's critical gaze aimed right at her, intensifying her personal conflict. Lena clenched her fists, battling the urge to shrink back behind her scripted remarks. If she hesitated now, what message would that send? Would the narrative remain unchallenged? Let's explore how our personal stories can connect us, showing our journeys as both individuals and as a team, she continued during a brief moment of silence. The challenge was not just to lead, but to break the molds they had all become trapped in, a realization that surged within her like electricity. As she facilitated an exercise encouraging open sharing, Lena watched her team wrestle with vulnerability. The room began to breathe, their fears laid bare, yet there was an undercurrent of discomfort. How much of themselves were they willing to reveal to one another? Lena felt a flicker of debate run through her. Could her allies truly embrace their authenticity, or would the pervasive skepticism tether them back to norms? Breaking the ice with her own story, she recounted moments of doubt, of being dismissed, of having to claw her way from the margins, and chose to frame them as educational pivot points. Lena's honesty hung in the air, a tangible gift that encouraged, yet it invited scrutiny, especially from Carla, who shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her voice rising in confidence, Lena leaned in deeper. What if we dared to be the architects of our own narratives? The fear we face isn't just personal. It reflects the larger system. I challenge us to transform that fear into fuel. What can our combined experiences teach us about true leadership? As the room began to engage, Lena felt the tide turning. Conversations ignited, and a few colleagues, more empowered by her vulnerability, shared their own battles. But Carla remained silent, the skepticism radiating from her like a shield. That look of detached examination unsettled Lena, causing her internal conflict to bubble to the surface. Should she confront Carla head-on, risking the fragile momentum building, or should she steer the focus towards the collective? Each option loomed like a fork in the road, amplifying the tension in her chest. The session drew to a close, leaving lingering unease as Lena lay bare her intentions. A palpable distortion of hope and discomfort fused the atmosphere, and yet she dared to push further. With her heart beating fervently, she turned to Carla. You seem to have thoughts about our discussion. I would value your perspective. The room quieted, every eye drawn toward them. Lena had stepped beyond safety into a space of vulnerability and confrontation, ready to unveil deeper truths. As the silence thickened, she sensed that the outcome of this moment could either validate her efforts or unravel the delicate fabric of trust she had begun to weave. Would Carla rise to critique or engage? That flicker of anticipation danced within Lena, underscoring the ever-present reality that her next move was crucial to everything she aspired to transform. Lena held her breath, her pulse echoing in her ears as she awaited Carla's response. The executive's eyes narrowed slightly, her expression difficult to decipher. Instead of addressing the room, Carla leaned back, a confident smirk playing at the corners of her lips. Interesting approach, Lena. Vulnerability as a corporate strategy. I suppose we'll see how that plays out. The dismissive tone struck Lena like a cold slap. This was not the reaction she had hoped for. There was no challenge, no engagement. The room buzzed with half-stifled murmurs, each colleague processing the charged atmosphere differently. She recognized the flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. They were gauging not just Lena's worthiness, but the legitimacy of her perspective. Lena felt the weight pressing down on her. A decision needed to be made. Should she retreat into herself or rise to this occasion? She recalled the many times she had shied away from confrontation, choosing safety over authenticity. But this moment called for a different response. Taking a measured breath, she refused to let the sting of Carla's words deter her. Vulnerability isn't weakness, Carla. It's a strength that fosters trust and innovation. If we can't share who we truly are, how can we expect to lead others effectively? The room held its breath, aware that Lena was pushing boundaries she hadn't dared touch before. Carla appeared unperturbed, a slight raising of her eyebrow the only indication of her annoyance. And perhaps that's a bit idealistic. This is a business, Lena, not some soapbox for personal storytelling. The tension thickened. Colleagues exchanged uncertain glances, weighing Lena's moxie against Carla's unapologetic realism. They had seen Lena's evolution, but hadn't fully grasped the depths of her resolve. She wanted to inspire them to challenge their own norms, just as she was doing. Yet fear loomed in the air, threatening to suffocate the burgeoning empowerment she had ignited. Are we not more effective leaders when we understand our personal narratives? Lena pressed on. How can we cultivate a culture that values authenticity if we're afraid to express ourselves? Carla sighed, feigning exasperation. You can't control how others react to your stories, Lena. They might not respond the way you think they will. They might even think you're unqualified for the corporate ladder we're all climbing. Lena felt the room shift again. Some nodded in agreement with Carla. Doubt seeped through the cracks of her confidence, but as she glanced around, she caught the gaze of a junior analyst, someone she had mentored in the past. Their eyes sparkled with curiosity and hope, silence filled not with judgment but with a yearning for connection. In that single moment, Lena's conviction hardened. We're here to build a bridge, Carla, not a mountain. True leadership is about showing up fully, flaws included. If I've already made my mistake by sharing my story, so be it. At least I'm owning my narrative. The silence echoed back, a challenge thrown. Lena had stripped away the safe layers of professionalism and exposed herself to criticism. Would they rally together, or would it scatter them? Carla's expression hardened, and Lena could see several thoughts flickering behind those calculating eyes. This confrontation served as a campaign for her own authenticity, and yet showed Lena how deeply her self-worth was still tied to the opinions of power players like Carla. Lena, I admire your passion, Carla finally replied, her tone now almost cordial. But there's a difference between passion and being professional. We'll see how your approach plays out in results. With that, she leaned back, crossing her arms as though she had withdrawn her support, leaving the room in a murky silence once again. As Lena processed this exchange, uncertainty flooded through her. Was she brave, or simply naive? The workshop may have taken a dramatic turn, but could this be what she needed to sharpen her resolve? A lingering shadow of doubt loomed as she prepared to close the session, feeling both emboldened and fragile. She had taken a stand, but at what cost? Would this encounter redefine her career, or would it entrench her deeper into the very skepticism she sought to dissolve? The session ended with more questions than answers, and as she gathered her notes, Lena felt the pull of introspection. There was no escaping the reckoning that lay ahead. With a determined heart, she resolved to navigate through this precarious tightrope of authenticity and ambition. Her journey was far from over. This confrontation had opened a door to deeper battles within herself. But as she stood there, she couldn't shake the unease of knowing that an inevitable clash awaited her. Facing Carla was merely the beginning. She understood that change would demand everything she had. Would she be ready to confront not only Carla, but the doubts rooted in her own beliefs of leadership? What emerged next in her story would challenge not just her professional life, but the very foundations of her identity. As Lena stepped out of the conference room, the buzz of chatter faded into the background, each voice a ghost in her mind. She leaned against the cool wall, allowing the fleeting pressure of the confrontation to seep away. With her heart still racing, she replayed the moments in her head, the disbelief shadowing her colleagues' faces, the silent challenge it sparked, and the way she stood firm despite Carla's dismissive stance. Yet, beneath the surface triumph, whispered a truth she could no longer ignore. This battle was more than corporate politics. It was a crucible revealing her innermost fears and aspirations. Lena had always defined her self-worth through her achievements, how well she performed in her role, the accolades she accumulated over time. But now, standing in the dim hall caught between pride and trepidation, she began to grapple with the sharp edges of vulnerability she had embraced. Not everyone respected authenticity. Some saw only weakness. What if she was mistaken? What if vulnerability became an Achilles heel rather than a strength? Wrestling with these questions, she could feel the fiery determination within her dim somewhat. She had initiated a pivotal shift in the way they discussed leadership, bringing humanity into a world ruled by numbers and metrics. But had she prepared for the repercussions? Gritting her teeth, she resolved to seek answers, not from her mentor, not from her colleagues, but from the roots of the beliefs that shaped her approach to leadership. Feeling the need to recalibrate her strategies, Lena decided to consult with individuals who had succeeded by defying the norms, those who thrived in environments where vulnerability and authenticity were prized. She began by reaching out to her network, recalling hushed conversations over coffee where ideas flowed freely. By evening, she had managed to gather 3 former mentors, individuals she greatly respected, each successful in different walks of life. As they settled in at a local cafe, the warm atmosphere contrasting the chill of uncertainty swirling inside her, Lena opened up. "I'm struggling with the way vulnerability is perceived in professional settings. How do you balance authenticity with the need to be taken seriously?" Her mentors listened intently, nodding as they absorbed her plight. The first, a seasoned executive in a tech firm, shared her own experiences with skepticism from her peers when embracing her authenticity. "Lena, it's about proving your value. Vulnerability can invite scrutiny, but it's also a powerful way to forge genuine connections. Be transparent, yes, but back it up with results. Show them you're not just a storyteller, you're also a doer." The second, a successful entrepreneur, added layers to that advice. "You need to take calculated risks. Not every story will resonate, and that's okay. But when you share, do it with purpose. Bring your experiences full circle to how they lead to innovation or growth." As Lena absorbed the wisdom, influences sparked new thoughts within her. She began to envision a plan, a potential initiative that merged authenticity with measurable outcomes. Something tangible her colleagues couldn't dismiss. The blunt comments, the doubts, they could materialize into a collaborative platform where everyone could share their narratives and connect those personal insights to their professional goals. She felt the pulse of ambition return, stronger than before. It wasn't enough to simply speak out. She needed a systematic approach that aligned her authenticity with the organization's objectives. Each story shared must be a stepping stone toward collective growth, embedding understanding at every level. And yet, a shadow lurked just beyond the horizon of her clarity. Carla's looming presence weighed heavy in her mind. Would the very system she aimed to shift respond positively, or continue to stifle? What would the reaction be when she presented her plan? It was a bold move that could either rally her colleagues or isolate her further. As the meeting wrapped up with her mentors, Lena felt a surge of possibility, alongside the undeniable tension of impending opposition. The time had come to face Carla again, to advocate not just for her vision, but also for the fundamental need for authenticity at work. She still hadn't reconciled if her path was destined for glory or peril. Stepping back into the fading sunlight as her mentors departed, Lena took a deep breath, centered by the conviction burgeoning within. This was more than positioning herself within a corporate hierarchy. It was about seizing her narrative and redefining the way leadership was perceived. But would that be enough to dismantle the doubts seeded by Carla's earlier criticisms? The next confrontation was inevitable, but would she emerge transformed or crushed? With the stakes further raised, Lena readied herself to embark on the most critical phase of her journey yet. She could not only envision change, soon she would have to act upon it, bridging the gap between authenticity and authority. The pivotal meeting awaited her, but she had to return to herself first, rediscovering the power of her own story before stepping back into the ring with Carla. With every heartbeat echoing the pulse of relentless determination, she resolved to articulate a truth that transcended her fears. It was not just about her defenses, it was about instilling a new cultural lexicon of leadership within her organization. The moment of truth was fast approaching. Would she find her voice behind the polished mask of corporate etiquette, or would authenticity break down invisible barriers ready to receive it? Lena arrived early at the office the next morning, her mind a tempest of thoughts and emotions swirling into a singular focus, the meeting she had envisioned all night. She slid into her usual spot at the conference table, her heart thudding in her chest. This was not just a routine discussion. It was a crucial step toward redefining how leadership could be nurtured, marked by authenticity and personal engagement. As her colleagues trickled in, she scanned their faces, searching for familiar expressions of support or skepticism. Each one carried the weight of expectations, hers and theirs. The hours leading to the meeting seemed to stretch, her anxiety simmering just below the surface. Was she truly prepared for this? Would her ideas resonate or provoke further resistance? In a moment of clarity amid the chaos, Lena reminded herself of the advice from her mentors. This was about more than just her own discomfort. It was about creating a framework that would bring transformation to everyone involved. She took a deep breath, allowing the air to fill her lungs, and centered her thoughts. Today, her voice would not waver. As the meeting commenced, Lena felt the familiar tug of doubt. Carla entered the room last, with an air of unrelenting authority that sank into the fabric of the gathering. Lena swallowed hard, feeling the room subtly shift in its dynamics. It was now or never. "Thank you all for coming today," she began, her voice resonating with a newfound steadiness. "I want to share a vision for fostering an environment where authenticity is not seen as a weakness, but as a strength, a tool for deeper connections among us." She shared her proposal, detailing a platform for colleagues to share personal stories alongside their professional ones, illustrating how their journeys shaped their contributions. As she spoke, Lena observed the interplay of expressions among her peers, interest from some, skepticism from others, but she pressed on, invoking the examples and advice gleaned from her mentors with invigorating conviction. Her passion ignited the room, creating an undercurrent of engagement that began to dissolve some of the guarded attitudes. However, as she rounded the corner of her presentation, Carla's voice sliced through the momentum. "Lena, this all sounds lovely in theory, but how do we measure success? Stories are subjective. They can't be quantified in a way that our organization values." The challenge hung in the air, a palpable tension that tightened around Lena's resolve. With a flicker of uncertainty brightening the moment, Lena drew from the well of her thoughts. She had anticipated this reaction. "That's exactly the point, Carla. When we measure success through rigid metrics alone, we risk overlooking the richness of human experience that drives innovation. My proposal includes methods to gather qualitative data alongside traditional metrics. We can learn from these stories and contextualize them within our objectives." Her defense mingled with daring, and Lena felt the tide shift as she spoke. There was something electrifying about standing firm while navigating the immediate discomfort. The room began to murmur, the initial skepticism tangibly waning as her colleagues processed her argument. Yet, just as she began to feel the momentum shift in her favor, Carla jumped back in, her tone sharper than before. "It sounds like you want to glamorize personal anecdotes at the expense of performance. Have you thought about how this approach affects productivity?" Heat pooled in Lena's chest, yet she stood still, realizing this was not just about winning an argument. It was a moment of confrontation with her doubts. Would she yield to Carla's relentless critique or hold her ground? "I understand your concerns, Carla," Lena said slowly, weighing her words. "But authentic leadership creates environments where employees feel valued and understood. When we empower individuals to share their experiences, we'll see a ripple effect in engagement and innovation. This isn't about glamorizing. It's about grounding our performance in shared humanity." The room fell silent, tension thickening like fog. Lena sensed the challenge had deepened, both externally and internally. Would her colleagues buy into this concept, or would Carla's hard-nosed pragmatism extinguish her passion? As the meeting drew to a close, Lena felt the weight of her vulnerability. To expose her beliefs in such a charged space could be either liberating or devastating. Faced with the realities of her ambitious plans, a flicker of hope intertwined with anxiety for what might come next. She knew the road ahead would require navigational adjustments amidst potential setbacks. Yet beneath the lingering tension, the possibility of change shone brightly. Would she gain the support needed to forge this new path, or would she find herself further entrenched in opposition? Emerging into the hallway, Lena resolved to follow her instincts. It was impossible to predict the outcome, but she could not ignore the quiet surge of possibility brewing inside her. Taking the leap was daunting, yet transformative. Would her next steps carve a new identity for leadership, or expose deeper weaknesses? The moment of reckoning lay just ahead, poised for action. Lena stood outside the conference room, the sounds of her colleagues slowly retreating into the depths of her mind. The meeting had brought her face to face with her deepest fears, and the conversations had been charged with the unsettling tension that came from challenging the status quo. But as she caught her breath, something within her shifted. The confrontation had been uncomfortable, but each word she'd spoken felt like an affirmation of her journey, a commitment not only to herself, but to the greater narrative of leadership. She had entered the meeting room as a woman seeking validation, and left as a person determined to redefine what leadership could embody. The whisper of doubt that had shadowed her throughout her career had been met with a ferocity she didn't know she possessed. With every passionate word she spoke about the need for authenticity, she was forging a new identity, one where vulnerability did not equate to weakness, but rather an avenue for deeper connection and innovation. Days passed after that pivotal meeting, and Lena worked tirelessly to translate her vision into action. Each interaction with her colleagues felt layer after layer of re-establishing her presence. She engaged in light conversations to interlace her ideals into the fabric of their collective narratives. The skepticism still flickered in some eyes, yet prevailing curiosity mingled with discomfort, coaxing them towards a broader understanding. As her team began to grasp the potential of shared stories, Lena noticed a transformation not only in their demeanor, but also in the progression of their collaborative outcomes. The spirit of sharing cultivated an unspoken trust, a bond that amplified creativity and camaraderie. Results began to speak for themselves as employees who felt valued naturally contributed more innovative solutions, each story adding a thread to the growing tapestry of the company culture. Then, in a serendipitous twist of fate, Lena received an invitation to speak at an industry conference, the same space she had once feared stepping into years ago. The prospect thrilled her. This would be her chance to showcase the very principles she had fought hard to establish. But the significance of this moment wasn't lost on her. It was a platform to elevate not just her story, but the stories of countless others who needed to feel seen and validated. As she prepared for her talk, Lena reflected on how far she had traveled from the woman cornered in a plain aisle by entitlement. In that moment, on the verge of sharing her vision with the world, she realized her growth had expanded beyond her expectations. No longer did she see herself as defying checkboxes or clinging to titles. She was pioneering a movement for authentic leadership that empowered every voice around her. On the day of the conference, as she stepped into the auditorium bustling with professionals from all hemispheres of the tech industry, anticipation thrummed through the air. Lena took a moment before she approached the podium, mentally absorbing the sheer magnitude of this opportunity. She looked over the crowd, acknowledging the diversity of experiences and aspirations lurking within the audience. With her heart pounding, she grounded herself in the reality of her journey, the challenges, the progress, and the transformations that lay ahead. After her introduction, Lena launched into her narrative with palpable authenticity. She emphasized the power of vulnerability entwined with story sharing, turning the stage into a space for connection, inspiration, and challenge. By the end of her presentation, the atmosphere buzzed with enthusiasm and engagement. Many people approached her during the break, eager to discuss ways to implement similar initiatives within their workplaces. It was a confirmation of her mission. She had not just found her voice, but also a platform where the voices of others could resonate and thrive. Months later, Lena received an award for her budding initiative, a recognition of the impact on workplace culture across her organization. As she stood before her peers, humbled by their support, she accepted the award not as a symbol of her achievement, but as a testament to the collective effort that had evolved around her vision. The applause echoed around her, a blend of respect and acknowledgments that solidified her newfound competence. In that moment of triumph, Lena felt an overwhelming sense of pride, not just in the accolades, but in the transformative journey she had carved out. The face of leadership, she realized, would never again be solely defined by titles or authority. It was a multifaceted reflection of authenticity, resilience, and undeniable strength. She had achieved recognition not merely for herself, but for every unacknowledged voice yearning to break through barriers. As she stepped off the stage, a solid confidence washed over her. She had conquered her internal battles, and through that, she had woven herself into the fabric of a new narrative. This was the moment she would carry with her, an achievement born from struggle, a fulfillment harvested through fierce perseverance, a legacy she was committed to nurture for those who would follow. Now, it is your turn to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. This really makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. It matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to support the channel today. Don't wait even one more second. True fans of personal overcoming stories know how essential these actions are.